You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 18th of April, 2025, on Monocle Radio.
Will the United States tip into recession? Economists flip a coin. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni escapes the Oval Office without mockery of her ensemble. And should individual European leaders be seeking Trump's favour or presenting a united front? I'm Andrew Mueller. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from our studios here at Midori House in London. I'm Andrew Mueller. My guests Anita Ryota and Chris Chermak will discuss the day's big stories, and we'll have live music from La Force and our weekly reflection on what we've learned. Stay tuned, all that and more coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. This is the Monocle Daily. I'm Andrew Mueller, and I am joined today by Monocle Radio producer Anita Ryota and our senior news editor Chris Chermak. Hello to you both.
Hello.
Hello,
Happy
Andrew.
Good Friday.
Happy Good Friday. Is that a thing we say?
I mean, happy Easter, but I didn't want to say Easter because it isn't actually Easter yet. It's Good Friday. So I did catch myself in a complicated conundrum there, yeah.
Enraged listeners should correspond with Chris directly rather than Monocle as an entity. I will have no further blasphemy on this program, Chris.
I appreciate that, standing up for everyone.
Anita, this time last week we were up a hill in Greece.
We were. We had a great time in Greece. We got a lot of amazing coverage from the Delphi Economic Forum. And then, Chris, not to make you too jealous, but Andrew and I did go see the Acropolis together in Athens, his first time.
It was.
And
your first time seeing the
it was
Acropolis.
amazing.
I know, it's ridiculous, isn't it? It was literally the first time I'd ever been to Athens, because I know I'd been to Delphi before, as you well know, Chris, because you were there last year, but on neither occasion had I been able to have the day off in Athens at the end of it.
See, last year I was the one who took the opportunity after Delphi to go to Athens for a couple of days and see the Acropolis. So I got in there a year before you, Andrew.
Yeah, we noticed where you chiseled your initials on the pillow.
Exactly. I got to make my mark everywhere I go.
Exactly, but while we were at the Acropolis, Chris, where were you?
Well, while you were at the Acropolis in the rain, I was watching the Oxford-Cambridge boat race in the rain over here, which Cambridge won by a depressingly large margin, which was particularly depressing because we were towards the end of the race. So by the time the two boats got to us, it was all said and done and not that exciting, to be honest.
When you say depressingly large margin, do you have some allegiance to Oxford, or were you merely hoping for a compellingly close
I just
contest?
like a close race. I don't have any allegiances in either direction, I have to say, but I just like, you want to see some excitement. You want to see the cheering. And at that point, it was like, what are you going to cheer? Like, all the other boats were right behind Oxford, like the stragglers and the referees and everyone, which just showed how far behind they were at that point. It was kind of sad.
Well, we will start the show proper in the United States, and with the prospects of the US tipping itself, and very possibly by extension the rest of us, into an entirely self-inflicted recession within the next 12 months. According to a poll of economics boffins undertaken by Reuters, there is about an evens chance of this occurring, though it is arguable that this tells us only that polling economists is about as productive as waging an eccentric and arbitrary tariff war against the world, including parts of it, of which few had previously heard, though it is reported that the penguins of the Heard and McDonald Islands are now willing to negotiate. Chris, first of all, are you excited for the self-inflicted recession?
I mean, particularly the self-inflicted part of it, yes. That is the most exciting thing. I found it really interesting to watch both the market reaction and then Trump's political reactions as a result from that. Normally, even Donald Trump, this was his one thing that seemed to work, even in his first term and through the first couple of months, anyway, of this term, that he could kind of do whatever he wanted, in part because the economy wasn't so directly affected and markets would continue going up, and he was always so happy with that. This has now changed because markets suddenly made this realization that, oh, wait, he is serious about this tariffs thing. He is actually imposing tariffs. He is imposing costs on the economy. And they reacted to that. What's fascinating for me is he's now suddenly reacted to that and going, okay, well, maybe I'm not so serious about the tariffs. We're going to reach a deal. We're going to reach trade deals. You were going to talk about this later, but he's now saying 100% I'm going to reach a deal with the European Union as well. all of that at this point just creates so much uncertainty in the American economy that is what is going to almost lead to a recession more than the tariffs. Nobody knows where this economy is going to go. Businesses can't plan. Companies cannot plan. Countries cannot plan for what's going to happen in the next few months.
Anita, you have been doing diligent research into indications of a rickety economy.
Yes. So Chris came downstairs for this interview prepared with true hard economic data. I had a slightly different remit, or I gave myself a different remit. What are the things we're seeing just in society that could be indications that we're heading towards a recession? Let me tell you a few. First and foremost, your favorite festival, Coachella, as we all know.
It's my equal favourite festival, which is to say I find all of them detestable, and there are not sufficient wild horses at large in this entire hemisphere that would get me anywhere near any of them.
Well, if you reconsider for next year...
It won't be Coachella.
You could join 60% of attendees that bought a ticket on a payment plan so that they essentially pay their ticket in installations.
Presumably
in installments.
with interest charged.
You have to assume that. But it's, the attendees of Coachella are all quite young, mostly quite a young cohort. So I do think it's interesting to know that 60% of them chose that for whatever their economic situation is, it was better for them, even if these tickets, I would assume, are probably like $400, $500. They're really expensive. But 60% of those people thought $500 in one fell swoop is not doable or smart or my preferred option. I think that's an interesting one.
Especially when you consider how many British people spend how much of their time complaining about how much higher wages in the United States are than they are here.
Exactly. And something else the U.S. is seeing is law school applications, even just in the last few months are increasing. My own alma mater, for my undergrad, Georgetown saw a 25% jump. Some economists are saying this could be the population or young people deciding that they need more stable employment, that having a financially successful career is something that is more important.
Or they could just be realising that there's going to be a lot of prosecuting that needs doing out the other side of the
That's
current.
what I was imagining.
Out the other side of this administration.
Surging business.
And I got two last ones for you.
Go on.
One is hairdressers are starting to see their customers come in for cheaper treatments. That probably means you'll start seeing fewer blondes walking around because dyeing your hair blonde is very expensive. And
That's upsetting for you, Chris.
I don't know what to say to that.
doesn't know what to say to that. Is blushing a little bit.
It'll grow out, Chris. The natural colour will return.
Yeah,
It'll
this
be
was
fine.
the one moment.
Exactly.
This was the year I was
It'll be
going to
fine.
dye my hair blonde for the first time in my life, and now that chance has evaporated.
Look, I think
Sad.
us fake redheads were safe for now, but the blondes, it's tougher for them. And lastly, you're starting to see an increase of content creation and watching of people gardening, because the idea is that if you can grow your own vegetables in the house with a fancy garden that you have, because you do need a garden. I don't know, spoiler alert, you do need a garden
You don't really
to
have
plant.
an allotment tradition in the
Yeah,
US,
so-
do you? That's true.
No, exactly. So I'm sort of thinking, what rich people are going to start planting to save money on vegetables. But that's another one that's happening, is planting your own vegetables to save money.
But in recessionary times, people are more likely to watch videos of other people planting vegetables.
I think that there is something voyeuristic there. If you're in a small apartment and your rent is expensive, and maybe it's exciting to watch someone, barefoot connecting with the earth and feeding themselves and their family with their own vegetables.
Returning from the micro to the macro, Chris, if this does happen and Donald Trump's tariffs do tip the United States into recession, is this, and I know we've been asking this question with increasingly desperate tones for the last 12 years or so, is this where people start going, okay, joke's over?
For Donald Trump. Yes, I think there is some possibility of that. And I think I can look at one other economic indicator to point to that, because if you look at the way consumers are feeling right now, these consumer sentiment indexes that you have, including the University of Michigan does one, what's so interesting about it is normally what's fascinating because of how polarized the U.S. is, when one president comes into power, suddenly the members of that party become very optimistic about how the economy is going and the others become depressed. So as soon as Trump took office, Republicans became very optimistic about how the economy was doing. Suddenly, immediately, it switched and they were optimistic about their economic fortunes. This has now shifted over the last month or couple of months. What you're seeing in these sentiment indexes is that actually cross-party concerns are coming across. Both Democrats and Republicans are worried about their economic conditions. They're worried about inflation. Inflation expectations are at their highest level since 1981. And that, too, is not just Democrats. It is Republicans as well that are worried about that. So if that's the kind of thing that starts to take hold, and even Republicans say, you know what, prices are going up, I think that's true. I'm seeing prices go up as well. There might be a point where this starts to affect Donald Trump as president and his political fortunes and the Republican Party's political fortunes.
Well, we'll stay in the United States as Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has been visiting President Donald Trump at the White House and vowing to, listeners may wish to grasp their toes to prevent them from curling, make the West great again, though the acronym NTWGWA seems unlikely to catch on. Meloni has long appeared to be, and certainly has long fancied herself as, one of the European leaders to whom Trump objects least, and their meeting appears to have gone relatively affably. The president also said there will 100% be a tariff deal with the EU, and when have we ever known Donald Trump to oversell anything? Anita, an Italian-American on the panel, which is helpful right now, because Prime Minister Meloni is, having got through this meeting, now dashing back to Rome to catch up with Vice President Vance. Does she fancy herself as perhaps a special case in the eyes of this US administration?
I think she certainly does, and I'm not sure she's wrong. It has been very interesting to see just how much Trump seems to enjoy her, maybe even like her. She was the only European leader, the only global leader invited to his inauguration. Chris and I were speaking about this earlier, but they speak the same language, and they speak the same language earnestly. They share, the question of whether Trump actually believes his ideology is a whole other conversation, but the ideology that they put out there is the same. They're against immigration. They're against the woke mob. They issue or put out a lot of the same ideas. So I think that he can find common footing with her. And she does also have this sort of no-nonsense directness about her. And I guess even just the fact that she speaks Italian is playing in her favor. There's this clip really making the rounds in all of Italian media where she takes a question in the White House from an Italian journalist in Italian, and Trump just looks at her sort of mesmerized and says, "That was beautiful," because he's shocked that some people know more than one language.
I mean, it is a nice language to listen to. I'm not just saying that because you're sitting here. But to follow that up, Anita, Trump has also been invited to Italy and has said he will go. But is he as toxic in Italy as he is in most of the rest of the West? I mean, if you look right now at two of America's allies which are having general election campaigns, i.e. Canada and Australia, Trump appears to be on the verge of winning both of those for the centre-left parties who have successfully tagged their conservative opponents as the parties of Trump.
No, I don't think he has quite the same reputation or gets the same reaction out of Italians. First and foremost, I think it's important to note that Italians have a very high tolerance for the wacky, let's say. They elected Silvio Berlusconi multiple times over the span of, 30 years. So Italians are not a population, I think, that gets offended easily, that judges easily, that sort of clutches pearls easily. And Trump hasn't really come out and said anything that the Italians should sort of take offense to, specifically about them. He has put Giorgia Meloni at the center of the transatlantic relationship. So I wonder if anything, there might be an appreciation that Italy is sort of now being given this more power broker position that it certainly did not have, at maybe any point before this. And I just do think, lastly, it's interesting to note that on Italian media, not only are they covering the meeting, but then they're covering the fact that the New York Times is saying X about Meloni, or the Washington Post, or the Financial Times. So just being put in the limelight in this way, I think might be appreciated for those who, haven't already made up their minds about him.
Chris, just finally on this, one of the people that Anita and I spoke to at the Delphi Economic Forum was the Prime Minister of Greece, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, who is another leader of whom Trump appears to approve, or at least doesn't have anything against. And I did ask him, are you tempted to kind of see yourself as a special case? And he did answer, I think, correctly diplomatically that no, European unity is what really matters, etc., etc. But might there be anything to be said for advancing maybe one or two European leaders, i.e. the ones who Donald Trump appears to be able to tolerate, as kind of emissaries, ambassadors, whatever you will?
First of all, Andrew, I just have to point out that you do have two Italian Americans here, even if I am further removed, if you didn't realize. But my mother is Italian American going back a few generations in that American way. I don't profess to therefore have as much knowledge as Anita has on Italy itself, because I did not have any connection to that. But just wanted to make that clear. When it comes to the emissaries,
so you're Italian American in about the same way that Joe Biden's Irish American, right?
Exactly.
No,
I am
okay.
exactly in that level, but it's still there. It's still there. To your point about emissaries, yes, I do think that is a tactic that could work, in part because Donald Trump famously doesn't really want to negotiate also with Brussels. He doesn't understand what the European Union is, so he wants to negotiate with national leaders. This has been a thing going back to Angela Merkel. He wanted to negotiate with Angela Merkel in his first term, and she had to point out to him, no, I actually have no power here. It is Brussels. Nonetheless, this is what I think will be very fascinating going forward. Will someone like the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen be willing to kind of play into this in some way? If Trump goes to Rome and meets with Giorgia Meloni and Ursula von der Leyen joins them and goes to Rome, will she be willing to kind of play into this a little bit and say, give Meloni a little bit of a role in the trade negotiations just to make things easier for Trump? Or is she going to say, no, this is entirely my purview. Meloni has nothing to do with something like the trade negotiations, and so it is something that is mine entirely. That relationship and how that relationship between Meloni and von der Leyen then extends to Donald Trump is going to be among the most fascinating, I think, in the next few weeks and months.
I would make the argument that she's already doing that. The fact that Meloni was the first European leader to meet with him after these tariffs, I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't think Ursula
spoke with von der Leyen on Monday before that meeting.
Exactly.
To compare notes.
And Ursula von der Leyen does not seem someone who does things without thinking them out carefully and in a calculated manner. And she also doesn't seem to be someone who needs to be in the spotlight or needs things to sort of be centered around her. So I think she would be thrilled if Meloni takes. Also, do you think Ursula von der Leyen really wants to spend that much time with Donald Trump in person? I don't know if she does. I don't want to speak for her, but I would argue
indirect talks between the EU and the US.
I would argue
Meloni
Brussels
back and forth.
Yeah, that Brussels is sort of already indicating that they're okay if Rome takes the lead on this one, at least verbally.
Anita Ryota and Chris Chermak, thank you both for joining us. You're listening to The Daily with me, Andrew Mueller. It's time now for some live music with Ariel Engel of Broken Social Scene, performing as her alter ego La Force. Ariel came to Midori House during her recent UK tour. I began by asking about the double meaning in the title of La Force's new album.
I'm just a fan of puns. I'm not really sure it's a pun.
It's a pun.
It's a pun. It's just not funny. But it's, polyvalent. So XO is in kiss and a hug, skeleton. And the idea is that in life we develop a kind of carapace to get through life. And in this instance, I think I was thinking about love. And I was thinking about how, if you have a good relationship with someone who has died, they live in you, but I suppose in some ways they live around you as a kind of protection. So I was thinking about that, one of the versions of exoskeleton. I'm also really interested in death in general. I think it's like unifying and fascinating idea. It's a frame for everything. So the skeleton is present in the record.
I mean, it's a fairly obvious preoccupation of the album.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, did making the album and exploring that idea cause you to think any differently about it than you had when you started writing it?
No. I think my evolution about my feelings about death has been more about experiencing grief and accepting death or being more comfortable with it. I think once a few people that you love are on the other side, whatever the other side means for you, death feels different.
I mean, is it important, given that context, that this album was recorded at home where you grew up? Because it's obviously not unusual anymore for people to make records at home, but I'm just wondering if, given the themes of this record, that became more of a thing.
Yeah, it was recorded in the house I grew up in the house my father died in the house that's sort of a kind of a carapace for me in that it holds, like a palimpsest, it holds so many memories. So yeah, I mean, I think I would have written a record about death no matter where I was. I could have been in Ibiza.
But did the Ibiza Death album, I would be curious to hear that.
Maybe just up-tempo.
But did the general circumstances also loom on this? Because I do often feel, especially talking to musicians in recent years, like sort of lockdown has become almost a genre in itself.
Oh, interesting.
And because this was kind of a lockdown record to some extent.
Yeah, sure.
Do you hear that in the record when you listen to it now?
Ouroboros is a little claustrophobic. It's a song about a snake eating its own tail. It's like a metaphor for returning sort of like narratives and currents and cycles of like strife and repair in relationships. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't have a...
But some of it did grow out of a sort of lockdown songwriting project, a kind of collective enterprise by musicians trying to keep each other sane.
Yes. Song a Day. Lots of this came out of something called Song a Day, which was this wonderful thing that Philip Weinrobe put together. I was invited in through my friend Feist, or Leslie Feist, as I know her, and she was like, we're doing this great thing. We have to, the task is to write a song a day, and it can be as small as a voice memo, and it can be as complete as a song. But the point is it has to have been written on that day, and you have to send it in by midnight. And it was great. It was just great. It was really generative.
Was that different to your usual writing habits?
Sure. so much more snacking and belly aching.
No, because I ask because there are some people who do think of it as a 9-to-5 job. Like I'm going to work, I'm sitting down.
Yes.
This is what I'm doing today.
Yes. Yeah. Those are people who have like discipline.
Which you don't see as one of your attributes?
I'm working on it. Yeah.
Well, you're going to do a song from the album for us, and it is the title track. I do have to ask about the opening line. Is it literally the case that this is generated by a conversation with an insurance agent?
Absolutely.
That's an unlikely genesis.
Yeah, we called her. We'd bought life insurance, which I'm not sure about, and I don't have it anymore. I just think the whole idea of getting life insurance is strange to me, but I had bought it. I was told I had to, and I did. I was being a good daughter. And then we called the agent, and she said, she was going over the contract, and she said, God forbid you should die. And it made me so mad. I was like, if there's anyone that has to be able to talk about death, it's an undertaker and a life insurance broker. Like, why is this such a taboo subject? I am going to die. Spoiler. And so are you, lady. So it's brass tacks. Come on.
Well, on that upbeat note, let's hear it.
God forbid you shall die. The life insurance broker said to me, I said, there's one thing guaranteed. said, no God, oh goddess, can't keep me alive, even in my eggs. Oh, skeleton. I can't tell how I feel, doesn't motivate or defeat me, but there's one thing guaranteed, death is how I believe. Here's a shell, a carapace, the honor of our last embrace. You will go, turn your face, pull into the shape of fate. Here's a shell, a carapace, and I'll make you away with excess and give you all to hold on to. Oh, oh, hey, oh, oh, oh. I will map you away with excess and give you all to hold on to. Oh, oh, hey, oh, oh, oh. And you, oh, you, oh, you, oh, you, hey, hey, oh, oh. Skeleton.
That was La Force live at Midori House. La Force's current album, Exoskeleton, is available now. Finally, on today's show, it is time for our weekly assessment of how much the wiser we are for the last 7 days.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
We learned this week that the gazillions amassed by Amazon proprietor and reason your new vacuum cleaner is in your neighbour's hedge, Jeff Bezos, had enabled him to enact what must rank high among the two most common human fantasies, i.e. the launching of one's paramour and or an annoying pop singer into space.
Lift off for a group of 6 women, including a pop star, a TV presenter and a scientist.
But then they came back. You can't have everything, not even, apparently, if you own the shop which sells everything. We learned, however, that the whole enterprise had not been a complete waste of whatever amount Bezos set light to in underwriting this point-free joyride, for we learned that dispatching thinkers of the caliber of Harley's in Hawaii hitmaker Katy Perry to the Carmen line had yielded philosophical insights easily fit to be rendered in florid typeface and pinned up as a poster on the wall of the sort of cafe that boasts deliberately mismatched furniture and a menu with smiley faces in the dots over the eyes.
There will be other trips, but there's only one first time. Incredible. So to be a pioneer is great.
Which makes a change from wasting it, am I right? We learned, however, that Bezos was not the only American mogul frittering his fortune on dubious simulacra of the real thing. We learned that some digging had been done into the provenance of the mysterious array of gold trophies which has descended upon US President Donald Trump's Oval Office mantelpiece in recent weeks, and that they are not, as had been widely and understandably assumed, self-awarded golf cups and Nobel Peace Prizes, but gilded tchotchkes which give every appearance of having been sourced from
China.
Specifically from Guangzhou Home Max Decorative Material Limited, which knocks this stuff out on Alibaba as high-density home decoration polyurethane appliques ornament PU foam veneer accessories at about $5 a go.
Minimum order 50 pieces.
We learned, however, or at least gleaned, that their presence in the Oval Office now means that Trump got in ahead of the tariffs, art of the deal right there. But we learned that they were dismally, appropriately bogus background to a conclave of the kind of hapless demagogues who can't even at least get the trains to run on time. For we learned that being a preening authoritarian is less straightforward than it may appear.
I can't wait to see where this goes.
Okay. Tell me more. Let's see where this goes.
We learned that neither President Trump nor his Salvadoran counterpart, President Nayib Bukele, are able between them to put one guy on a plane.
Can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to be suggesting that I smuggle terrorists into the United States, right?
We learned that the one guy in question, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who even the US administration admits was shipped to its Central American gulag as a consequence of administrative error, would not be coming home, as we learned that the US administration was determined to double down on its evidence. And mathematicians among our listeners will know what you get when you double nothing.
So he went back to his home country, where he will face consequences for his gang affiliation and his engagement in human trafficking. I'm not sure what is so difficult about this for everyone in the media to understand.
We are in the media maybe not as smart as Caroline Levitt, but we do understand that in the absence of any due process, Mr. Garcia has been engaged in human trafficking only inasmuch as he is a victim of it. But we learned that one of 21st century American conservatism's foremost thinkers, this is tragically a statement of fact, i.e. querulous Fox News mannequin Jesse Waters, had uncovered, with a flourish worthy of Columbo, the proof.
Garcia's a Bulls fan, but he's from El Salvador, and he lives in Maryland, not Chicago. The Bulls lost 60 games in 2019, so why the hat? Can Garcia name anyone on the team? Anyone on any Bulls team besides Jordan? Everyone from El Salvador knows what it means when you wear a Bulls hat.
Yes, we learned that anybody who supports any sports team based outside the immediate jurisdiction in which they were raised or now live is prima facie a dangerous criminal, and look therefore forward to the deportation of the hefty and noisy contingent of Manchester United and Liverpool supporters at large in London and indeed the wider home counties. This is not a sarcastic absurdism, we're genuinely into it. And cue big head, large blouse, bad in the 80s lone hit irritants flock of seagulls. Because, sticking with the subject of testy marauders apparently wrecking institutions for the sake of it, for those struggling to keep up, this is a wry segue calling back to President Trump.
I
get it now.
Righto, carry on.
We learned of the anarchist tendencies of the seagull. Yes, we learned that one such creature, so not actually a flock, but whatever, had forced the temporary closure of the Blavatnik School of Government at Oxford University by breaking a panel in its expensive glass roof by repeatedly dropping a rock on it. Please enjoy this verite audio of a seagull repeatedly dropping a rock on the expensive glass roof of the Blavatnik School of Government at Oxford University. We learned that boffins prevailed upon to explain this apparently gratuitous vandalism were insistent that it was consistent with such observed seagull behaviour as banging shellfish against hard surfaces to get at the contents, and were therefore failing to consider that maybe this particular seabird was acting with malevolent intent. Seabird with malevolent intent, right? And was therefore a turn for the worse. That's all for this edition of the Monocle Daily. Thanks to our panellists today, Anita Ryota and Chris Chermak. Today's show was produced by Tom Webb and researched by Gunnar Gronlid. Our sound engineer was Mariella Bevan. I'm Andrew Mueller here in London. The Daily is back at the same time on Monday. Thanks for listening and happy Easter.